It is my singular honor and privilege to address this commemoration of the 43rd International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. A wise man once said, ladies and gentlemen, that we make history not out of circumstances of our own choosing. However, we have engagement toward a future that is predictable, that is certain, and that is prosperous of South Africa that we want in 2030. And that future that is prosperous, ladies and gentlemen, is a mirror image of the future for the Africa that we want in 2063, which speaks about inclusive prosperity. And therefore the wise man once again reminds us, ladies and gentlemen, that the role of philosophers is to interpret the world, and our responsibility is to change the world. South Africa's national interest displays a people-centered, progressive and developmental outlook, as evidenced in our foreign policy imperatives and the execution thereof. And what is key and critical, ladies and gentlemen, in that foreign policy execution is our Pan-Africanism, our global solidarity, in particular with the South, North-to-North cooperation, and of course centrality of multilateralism. It is my submission that South Africa has been universally acclaimed for our role as a country which earned the sight of the vulnerable. It therefore owes, ladies and gentlemen, should we leapfrog to a prosperous Africa in 2063, it must be impermed by our value proposition to regard multilateralism as central to our task at hand and to frown upon unilateralism. We are commemorating, ladies and gentlemen, the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Human, convened in Beijing in 1995. And as South Africa is experiencing some of the most horrific incidents as it relates to gender-based violence and femicide, we have obligation, firstly as men of this continent and the world, to acknowledge, ladies and gentlemen, that the preemptive presence of masculinity has no place in our society. Our thematic approach as it relates to the 16 days of no violence against women and children is informed by our approach to realize financial and economic justice for all women. As we gathered here, ladies and gentlemen, we are also evidently conscious about the fact that we are also confronted by a different pandemic that is transnational in nature, that straddles both states and nations, the COVID-19 pandemic. The devastating impact of the coronavirus, ladies and gentlemen, has forced us to realize the vital centrality to cherish the apex institution of multilateralism, the United Nations, and the sister agencies. Please allow me at this juncture an opportunity to pay respect to all those who have lost their life as regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, in particular, ladies and gentlemen. The recent passing of Dr. Saeed Erekat, a prominent, elite Palestine peace negotiator, and a proponent of people's struggle. Ladies and gentlemen, whilst the world are confronted with this COVID-19 pandemic, Israel is exploiting the situation to escalate violence and to increase violations in its settlement, colonization, and annexation schemes by continuing to abolish and confiscate Palestine-owned structures and homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and thereby entrenching its military occupation. Earlier in October, ladies and gentlemen, it was announced by the Israeli authorities that they are going to advance on the quest to construct 5,000 new housing units in the occupied West Bank. And this marks 2020 as the year for the highest settlement expansion since 2012. It therefore holds, ladies and gentlemen, that the temptation of Israel to want to annex the entirety of the West Bank territory with the support of the Trump administration could only be negated by ensuring that we use 2020 as the year to ensure that we have a more strengthened United Nations that are able to conform and uphold the highest standards of multilateralism in the world order. We are also conscious about the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that 3 years to today, the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem as being the undivided capital of Israel, and in May 2018 moved the US Embassy there, annex key disputed parts of the Golan Islands, ramp up illegal settlements, while simultaneously, ladies and gentlemen, and unfortunately, withholding much needed humanitarian aid and withdrawing aid from a very prestigious UN agency, UNRWA. In a very radical and unfortunate shift by some Arab nations, 3 countries, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Sudan, have taken very unfortunate steps in the recent months towards normalizing relationships with the State of Israel. The prevailing formula, ladies and gentlemen, is outlined in the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. Once the normalization will be granted to the State of Israel only and in return for making meaningful political compromises with the people of Palestine. Excellencies, the Middle East peace process is at a stalemate, and though there has been several proposals to reach a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine prior to 2014, the ongoing conflict has defied all and every international commitments made by the United Nations. South Africa is of view, ladies and gentlemen, that the Madrid Principles, the Arab Peace Plan, the Geneva Initiative, the Quartet Roadmap, and the Paris International Peace Conference is a myriad of necessary policy considerations that would ultimately lead to a two-state solution. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand unflinching on the side of the most vulnerable of society, and in this instance, and in particular, the State of Israel. At our multilateral gatherings, as a chair of the African Union, and as the president in December of this year of the United Nations Security Council, in our capacity as a prominent member of the non-aligned movement, a member of the Organization of African Caribbean Pacific States, the old ACP, and of the G77, we have consistently, ladies and gentlemen, ensured that we have a consistent voting conduct and behavior, and that we are consistently regarded as the voice of the hopeless and the voice of the helpless in this plethora of multilateral organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, in August 2012, the South African government approved a government notice entitled 379 pertaining to the labeling of products from the occupied Palestine territories. And that has resulted in the State of Israel being profoundly distressed by the fact that the entirety of the South African cabinet, unanimous in its consensus, has approved a notice requiring the labeling of products emanating from the occupied territories. South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, has appointed presidential envoys who have visited several countries in the region and interacted with the leaders and opinion makers, soliciting the views of how the noble cause of a two-state solution could be advanced. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, on the 14th of May 2018, the South African government, through its cabinet, have recalled our former ambassador to Israel to protest the ongoing and unrelenting killings of hundreds of unarmed protesters taking part in the Great March of Return in the besieged Gaza. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, in 2019, the South African government began to actively downgrade its ties with the State of Israel in an unprecedented step, which goes against the current international trend of shielding Israel and protecting it from repercussions for its unfortunate policies and its disfranchisement of millions of Palestinian people. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, President Ramaphosa holds high hope that the change in administration in the United States of America will bring about a possibility for renewed effort to find a lasting solution as it relates to the Israeli-Palestine conflict. It is our submission today, ladies and gentlemen, that the idea presented by the Palestine ambassador, Palestine President Abbas, to hold an international peace conference in early 2021 appears to gain traction. South Africa therefore fully and unequivocally supports this call for an international conference with the participation of all concerned parties, particularly the Palestinian people. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, let me validate and amplify and underpin what is the foreign policy outlook of South Africa as it relates to the plight of the Palestinian people. One is that we'll continue to work with all like-minded countries to support international efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable, prosperous, secure Palestinian state existing side by side in peace and harmony with the state of Israel within international recognized borders based on the existing of those on 4 June 1967 with East Jerusalem, ladies and gentlemen, as its capital, in line with all relevant United Nations resolutions, international law, and internationally agreed parameters. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we wish you well in this very auspicious occasion. And remember what the wise man said, that we make history not in circumstances of our own choosing, and that our responsibility, unlike the philosophers, is not to interpret the world, but to change it. Thank you very much.